welcome to the DCE APR reporting webinar. This is for the 2023 reporting season. So we're going to be walking you through step-by-step how to complete your annual performance report so that you can have a successful and worry-free reporting season. So as normal, we will just kick it off with a little disclaiming.
This presentation was produced under U.S. Department of Education contract number GS00F115CA with Synergy Enterprises, Inc. The views expressed herein do not necessarily represent the positions or policies of the U.S. Department of Education. No official endorsement by the U.S. Department of Education of any product, commodity, service, or enterprise mentioned herein is intended or should be inferred.
All right, now that you're officially disclaimed, we want to welcome your program officer, Donna Savis-Burns, who'll be with us throughout the day, giving you all the great advice and tips. And then I'm Sarah Brightwell. I think I know everybody on. I'm the OIETA team lead. And so I'll be kind of walking you through your reporting process today. We're a small group. So as we go through, if you have questions, raise your hand, pop them in the chat, and we'll answer them as we go along. We also have little spots where we'll stop throughout after each section of the report for questions. But like I said, if you have questions as we're going, just let us know because we're a small enough group that we can answer those and make sure that you feel comfortable as we go. So as we get started, we are going to walk through each section of the report from your cover sheet to your executive summary, then to part A, B, and C. So you'll see over in the chat box that the other Sarah has conveniently placed a ton of documents for you to be able to download. You're welcome to go ahead and download those now, or I'll also send out an email after the webinar with the documents too, because I know sometimes you might be joining from your phone or from an iPad or something where it's a little difficult to download things. So don't worry, this won't be your only opportunity to get them. But I want to let you know what different documents you're getting there in the chat. One of them is a PDF that's just of this whole presentation. So you have this whole slide deck that you can thumb through that way. We're also recording, so you'll have access to the recording. I know lots of grantees have said that when they're working on their report, they'll kind of watch the part that they're working on and pause it, do a little, watch a little more, pause it, do a little. So you'll have access to that as well after. Then you'll also see that there is a sample APR. This is not meant as, oh, you need to copy this word for word, but just to kind of give you an idea of what a complete APR might look like. That's something that some grantees in previous years had requested and said would be helpful. So we did put together just a sample of what a complete APR could look like for a DCE grantee. Then you'll also notice there's what we call our APR checklist. This is a handy dandy tool that you can use as you're working on your APR. And then the way I really like to use it is once I'm done with my APR, I pull out my checklist and check over my report. And it's just a nice way to make sure you didn't forget anything, skip over anything, report something a little quirky, and feel really confident before you hit that submit button. And then the rest of the documents are your actual reporting forms. And that's what we'll walk through today. But you'll see there are actually 6 reporting forms that are also there in the chat for you. So that's everything there. Remember, we're going to email those out to you as well, so you have multiple opportunities for them. And then the next really important piece is to know when this report is due. So you have a good month to work on this. It is due April 28th, which is a Friday, by 11:59 p.m. Eastern time. Okay, so really keep that in mind that it doesn't go by your time zone. This is not like when you're online shopping and it adapts to you. It goes by government time, which is Eastern time. So when the clock strikes midnight Eastern time, your report turns into a pumpkin and cannot be submitted. You do not want to be that pumpkin come midnight. So by 11:59 Eastern time, hit that submit button. Now, ideally, you're going to submit before then, because the other thing you'll notice is basically all the OIE discretionary grants are due on April 28th. And so you're going to get a bit of a overload on the G5 system. Most of you have seen that G5 can be a little persnickety on a good day. let alone when you get every grantee ever on there trying to do something. So I highly encourage you to try to submit a few days in advance of the deadline so that you're not dealing with it moving really slow and timing out. That's what I would encourage. But if you do wait till the last minute, before midnight on the 28th. Now, the rest of the year, kind of looking at what happens after that. So your APR is due on April 28th. Your grant year ends September 30th, but you do have an APR update due by October 26th. That's the deadline. I would highly encourage you to complete it by the end of your grant year because it's pretty simple. You're just updating any measures that you've reported as incomplete data. You're just completing any of that data. So that's something that can be easily completed and submitted by the end of your grant year. October 26th is just the final time that you can turn that in. At our next talking circle, we'll actually give you more information about how to complete your APR update. That's not something you have to worry too much about right now, but I always think it's good to know those dates as you're going and kind of planning out your year. So why do we do APRs? One is just a requirement of your grant. So sometimes that's the reason we do things, but there is a larger reason. And that's because all multi-year discretionary grantees are required to submit an APR to demonstrate, this is the key part, substantial progress. If you're making substantial progress toward meeting your approved project objectives, then that allows your program officer to confidently approve your continuation award. And now, granted, y'all are in your last year of your grant, but you also want to be showing substantial progress so that you're getting any future awards. This is your opportunity through your APR to tell the story of your grant and your project and your outcomes each year. And these are reviewed and analyzed so that Ed can use them for those continuation awards, future awards, and also just to see what's going on in your programs and what's going on across the landscape. So across DCE or any of the other grant programs. So the APRs, while they can seem like your annual headache, are actually really, really an important piece of your grant year. Now, where are you going to do your reporting? G5. I think all of us are familiar with G5, but it's g5.gov. Make sure that if you haven't logged in lately, that you can. I have had grantees who kind of waited till the last minute, realized their login wasn't working, and then really had a lot of panic trying to get that fixed with the help desk. So make sure you can get in. Remember that only the project director of record can get into G5. So of course, we want you to work on preparing your report materials as a team, but only your project director can access G5 to actually input the data for reporting. Now you'll notice on the screen that we've highlighted the area with the help desk information. If you have any trouble with the actual G5 system, if it's not accepting your submission, if you're having trouble with your login, if it's locked you out of something, those are things that the G5 help desk can help you with. We at the TA team or your program officer honestly really aren't able to because we can't access that portion of G5. So that's why you need to contact the help desk. By the same token, if you're thinking, I don't remember if I'm supposed to report this as over 1 or over 10, or I'm not sure if I'm supposed to put my executive summary here or there, the help desk can't help you with that. They're solely helping you with the tech end of G5. If you have content questions about your report, that's when you want to reach out to the technical assistance team or your program officer. So that kind of tells you the two veins of assistance available. The other thing that I think is super helpful on that login page is when the system is going to be available. This is just a screenshot of the page on one particular day. This information does change because they schedule maintenance sometimes. You want to make sure that you don't get caught not having enough time because there's some scheduled maintenance going on. In particular, Sunday nights, it's almost always unavailable. So just kind of keep that in mind, but keep an eye on it so that you're not surprised by having it blocked off during a time that you plan to do some work because it's having routine maintenance done. On to your reporting forms. So the Ed 524B forms are your official APR reporting forms. That includes your cover sheet, your executive summary, and sections A, B, and C. Now, you'll see you've got in the chat and on this slide a link to where the reporting forms are, but we've also provided them for you. And one thing you'll notice ever so slightly different between when you download them yourself off the website versus if you just get them out of the chat box or off the email that we'll send, is that when you download them, they come as just two forms. There's one big form that's the cover sheet and executive summary. And then there's one big form that's sections A, B, and C. But that can be a little bit tricky because that's not how you actually use them. And that's not how you actually upload them into G5. You submit your cover sheet separate from your executive summary, separate from your section A, separate from your section B and C. So you'll see that the ones that we've provided for you in the chat and in the accompanying email, we went ahead and separated them out so that you're not having to try to erase portions of the form or fret with any of that. So just to make it a little bit easier for you. We'll also talk as we go throughout today about which forms are already in G5 for you, and you can just type your data right into it, and which forms you'll have to complete on your own and then just upload into G5, because you will have some of each. The other thing to make sure of, this isn't your first APR, so you may already have some Ed 524 forms laying around, but they may be expired. Up in the top right corner, there's an expiration date. The current set of forms expire July 31st, 2024. If you have any other date there, that is not the current reporting form and should not be used. Now, I mentioned that we have an APR checklist for you. You'll see it does not cover every little detail that we go over in the webinar. It hits the high points. It hits those areas that we think are either A, super, super important, or B, areas that we commonly see some mistakes in and we want to help you avoid. But it's a great tool for you to be able to use as you're working, and again, as a check at the end of your reporting before you hit the submit button. A few other tips to try to keep this reporting season as stress-free as possible. We will often have folks say, I can't get my signed cover sheet back into G5. So here's the process that typically works for most grantees. Go into G5, go into the cover sheet, enter all your information into the cover sheet in G5. They've got the form in there, type it in. Then hit the download button. That way, then you have the form and you can print it out and go get your authorized representative to sign it. Then come back. If you have a scanner in your office, scan it. If you don't, just grab your trusty phone and take a picture of it. That works too. And then upload it back into G5. In that same spot where you downloaded it from, you're able to upload it back. And also key, upload it as a PDF. G5 cooperates with PDFs much, much better than any other file type. If you follow this pattern, it should take your signed cover sheet. What sometimes happens is people will just take the form that you already have here, complete it, and then go try to upload it without completing the form in G5. And then it sometimes will pop up errors where it's not taking your upload. So if you complete it there, download, get it signed, scan it, and re-upload it, it should take your form no problem. Second tip, use that APR checklist. We really have designed it around those hot points that we've noticed in the past. It can help you make sure to avoid those. And then third tip, for the narrative sections, we really encourage you to, whether you use a separate document, your project planner, whatever is helpful for you, write out your narratives in advance. That way, A, you can use spelling and grammar check, which is always really nice and you can't use within G5. And B, you have it so that if G5 decides to eat it, you don't have to start over from scratch. And what I mean by that is that G5 will time out, even if you're actively in there working sometimes. And then grantees will say, but I just wrote this beautiful narrative or this beautiful explanation of progress, and now it's gone and I have to start over. And that's really frustrating. I agree. So save yourself screaming at the computer and just type all that out in a separate document and copy and paste it into G5. That way, if it does time out for any reason, you still have it and it's just a copy and paste over, not an entire rewrite. All right, let's dive into your cover sheet. This is the very first thing you'll complete. Just some things to remember. Make sure to include your PR award number and your correct PR award number. We do get APRs every year that uses an incorrect PR award number. Sometimes it's from one of your other grants or there's just a digit missing. Make sure that that is there and correct. For item 7, make sure to use the correct reporting period. Your reporting period is October 1st, 2022 to March 31st, 2023. Okay. That means that you are only reporting on things that have occurred through March 31st, through the end of this month. And the reason for that is that way you have all of April to write up what has happened. You're not trying to write up to the minute. Okay. So you're only reporting on what has occurred as of March 31st. Item 8 is your budget information. Item 8 on the cover sheet is solely based on drawdowns. Drawdowns in G5. So for 8A, it's going to be all the drawdowns from last year. So from October 1st, 2021 to September 30th, 2022. For 8B, it's going to be your drawdowns from October 1st, 2022 to March 31st, 2023. So again, just this reporting period. And then 8C, you're going to leave blank. Notice how it says for 8C for final performance reports only. And this isn't your final performance report. This is just your final APR. So 8A and 8B, you will complete. 8C, you will leave blank. Now, as we get to the bottom of the form, if you claim indirect cost on this grant, then you will need to complete number 9. On 9A, you'll mark either yes or no. Do you claim indirect cost or not? If you do, most of you will be then marking 9B, where you'll indicate the effective dates. Right here, the effective dates of your indirect cost rate agreement. Who you get your indirect cost rate agreement from. It might be Ed, but often it's other entities that actually provide you with that. And what that rate is right here. If you do not have current indirect cost rate agreement information on file with Donna, you will need to send that in to her as well. If for some reason you are using the de minimis rate, you'll mark C. That is not nearly as common as B and should only be used if you have received prior approval. All right, next up on there is item 10. Everybody should mark not applicable. Sometimes people want to select no. No is really indicating, oh, we should, but we're not. And you want not applicable because it is not applicable to your grant. For 11, you do need to mark yes, that you are aware of federal and state data security and student privacy regulations. And then either include a link to the policy that you have for your organization or attach your policy. Now we're on the back of the form. There are 2 things on the back of the form. The first being the question about your performance measure status. It asks you if complete data for your performance measures is available. If it is, if you're able to report all your data right now, then you mark yes and move on. If you are not, which is very often the case because you're only about 6 months through the grant year, then you mark no, and you have to give a date by which the data will be available. If you have a specific date that you know it'll be available, that's fine, but just know that it has to be available by the last day of the grant year, which would be September 30th, 2023. So you can also always use that date. So just keep in mind that if there are any portions of Section A that you do not have complete data for yet, that's okay, but you have to make sure and mark no here. And then the final and most important part of your cover sheet is going to be the signature of your authorized representative. So you'll see right here, your authorized representative must sign your cover sheet. Your project director is not your authorized representative. Those are two different people. If you're unsure who your authorized representative is, reach out and we can help you figure out who that is. And if it is changed, maybe that person retired or moved to a different position, now is the time to make that change because it has to be signed by them. So if you wait until April 27th to say, oh, by the way, our authorized representative is different, we may not be able to get that changed in time for your reporting deadline because that has to be changed in G5. So it is very important that you reach out to Donna and let her know if your authorized representative needs to change so that that can happen in G5. But it must be signed by your authorized representative. All right, any questions on the cover sheet? All right, then we have a question for you. You'll see as we go throughout today, we have a few poll questions to see if you are ready to be an APR superstar. So I'm going to pull up our first poll here. So we've given you a little example. We're doing our cover sheet for this grantee. You can see that we've met with our fiscal office and we've gotten all of our information on our expenditures and drawdowns for this year. So head over into the poll and let us know what belongs in 8A, 8B, and 8C for this particular grantee. Love the thinking faces.
We need Jeopardy music.
No, I would sing you some Jeopardy music, but then we would probably lose a lot of our viewers.
There's a mute button.
Yeah. We're getting your APR brains on early today. And if you're not able to see the poll, you're welcome to pop your responses in the chat box. And if you're on any type of mobile device, a tablet or a phone, often you have to just scroll across to be able to get to that poll. Sometimes it's just hiding on that next screen. Right. And as you're continuing to pop in your answers, this is definitely our best example of why it's important to have great communication with your fiscal office, because this is the type of info that you're going to need to be able to complete your APR. And unless you have G5 view only access, which we're always happy to help you figure out how to get done, you may not have the info without your fiscal office. All right, I see one brave soul. Too brave. Okay. All right. We're warming up. We're warming up. We're putting our answers in. I know I made you do math on the first poll. I promise I don't think we have any others that you have to do math for. All easier from here. All right, I see about half of us have put in an answer, so I'm going to give you just a few more seconds for these last few to hopefully pop in a response. I promise I will not call out answers of anyone. We're up to just a scotch over half. All right, I'm gonna give you about 10 more seconds and then we're calling this one. All right, so let me share your responses and we'll see. So on 8A, we were a little torn. We had some folks saying total expenditures from the last grant year, total drawdowns from the last grant year, total expenditures from this reporting period. So it is a little tricky. It is actually the total drawdowns from the last grant year. Because remember I said everything for number 8 is going to be drawdowns. It's all based on actual drawdowns. Because in the eyes of the government, it's only expended once it's drawn down. And so we got that one. Total drawdowns from the last grant year. Let's go to 2, the math question. So I see some of you were like, nothing, leave that blank, leave it alone. Some said the 131,059 and some said the 111,157. So the answer is 111,157. Okay, and the reason is because we're actually just adding up our drawdowns from October 1st to March 31st. So we didn't do any drawdowns in October. We're going to include our November ones, our December ones, our January ones, our February ones, and our March ones. But our reporting period ends at the end of March. So we're not including those April ones. So it's just these 5 drawdowns that should be included, which totals that 111,000 amount. Good mathing. All right. And then finally, 8C. We're torn again. Some said, leave that one blank. Total drawdowns from this reporting period or our total grant award. So 8C is only completed for your final performance report, which this is not your final performance report. You've got one more to go. This is your next to last. So that means that 8C should be blank. That one should be blank. All right, so I hope that was a helpful kind of reinforcement of what to do with 8 and that you made it through the mathing. Our next one, we have a couple of questions about number 12. This is another one that we often see some confusion on. I'm going to go ahead and pop up so that you can answer while we're kind of talking it through. So on this one, let's say we have a project measure, and this is for sake of the quiz, our only project measure. 75% of teachers will increase their proficiency in culturally responsive strategies by at least 1 level in 3 of 4 categories as measured by an observation rubric. So all observations this year had to be completed by March 31st. And so when I come to do my APR, what should I mark on 12? Should I mark yes, that I have data available, complete data, or should I mark no, that I do not have complete data available? And this one's more of a fast finger question. So you got about 15 seconds, and then that's going to lock in your answer choice. All right, let's check out our results. We were torn. About 2/3 of us said yes, we had complete data. About 1/3 said no. Yes, if we are just purely reporting based on this observation rubric and all of those were done by the end of March, which is the end of our reporting period, then we would have complete data available and be able to report that on our APR. All right, let me show you another situation. For this one, doesn't want to go to our next situation. There we go. If you were saying students were going to increase their reading proficiency by at least 5 points as measured by beginning and end of year benchmarks, you do your beginning of year benchmarks in September, you do your end of year benchmarks in April, what would we be marking on 12? Will we have complete data or no? This is your final fast finger question for the cover sheet. All right, we're going to go ahead and lock in our answers in 5 more seconds. All right, and you can see everybody agreed on this one that no, we would not have complete data, because if you're not even doing the test until April, that's well after our reporting period ends. So we would mark no, that we don't have complete data right now, but we will by the end of the grant year. All right, so y'all definitely have, you're pretty set for number 12. Any other questions you had on the cover sheet today? I'm checking the chat, but I don't see any particular questions. Which means then we're going to move over to our executive summary. So your executive summary is where you get to put together a narrative really highlighting what you've achieved during this reporting period, the progress you're making towards your goals. If you've already met some outcomes, maybe you've hit some hiccups, you've had some challenges, and you can share what those challenges were, how you have taken them and modified, worked around, found ways to address the challenges. If you've made any contributions to research, knowledge, practice, or policy, this is the opportunity to really give that nice bird's eye view of your project thus far this year. Now you are limited to a 2-page maximum. So you'll notice the form is a 2-page document. So you can write 1 to 2 pages about your program. But once you hit 2 pages, we do ask that any additional information you move to section C, because it is limited to that 2-page piece. What you're going to do with this is you will complete it on the form provided and then upload it as a PDF into the G5 system. And you'll see a spot that says Project Narrative Executive Summary, and you'll be able to upload it directly into G5. But remember, as a PDF. As you're writing your executive summary, one kind of tip to remember is you don't want to just write everything that you put in your section A. So don't just write out your goals and put exactly what you are placing in your explanations of progress. Really write this more as that true overview of what's been happening in your project, both really positive, those success stories and how you're doing and achieving your goals, but also those challenges, those hiccups that you've hit, the things that you've maybe had to regroup and address in a different manner. We want to hear both sides of that story here in your executive summary.
And you know, Sarah, one thing that I think would help too is, say when we try to do an abstract or a chapter, introduction chapter, sometimes it's easier to do this last, right?
Yes.
So you do all your other forms and then look and do that bird's eye view just by looking at all the other forms and what you've done and just kind of putting it out there. I don't know. That's a tip that I always found to be a little bit easier.
I agree. That's exactly what I do as well. Even when we were creating the sample APRs, it just seems easier to come back and do the executive summary last after you've completed all the other data.
Right.
Yeah, I agree. Well, and that's actually a good time to bring up our sample APR. So in the sample APR, you'll see we've put together an executive summary there. And you'll notice, like if you look in the yellow, we share a challenge that happened. You know, in this mock grantee, they lost their project director and it took a while to get a new project director in place. So we share that challenge. But then we also share how we address that challenge. Then you can see kind of highlighted in the blue, where we're also talking about how our project is progressing. So how our data collection is coming, and that we've actually modified our deadline for completing that data collection, and whether that might impact us needing a no-cost extension on our grant potentially. So we're putting all of that information here in this executive summary, and you'll see it's referenced again later in other parts of our report, but we're highlighting it here in this view. As we go further into that sample executive summary, you could see we again talk about another challenge we were having, securing contact information and permission. But then in green, we talk about how we addressed that and some positives, some success stories that we're having. And then in the blue, again, you'll see that we're really looking at the future, what's going to be happening, our plans for this last bit of our project, because we want to know, what do you expect to accomplish between now and the end of the project? How do you see yourself wrapping up this work? So again, the sample APR and executive summary are not meant as a perfect model, but just to give you an idea of what this could look like. All right, as we think about that, you have your next superstar question. We only have this one set for the executive summary. So here we go. What is the page length maximum for your executive summary? And if you have too much information and it won't fit, what do? You can't. And you'll notice none of the options are change your font to font size 6, because that is also not a great plan. If Donna has to get out a magnifying glass to read it, it won't go well.
I have bifocals, but
How strong? I used to have a student when I taught English that would do that. He was like, well, it wouldn't fit, so I just made it really tiny. Thanks. All right, you've got about 7 more seconds. Fast figure that answer in. I know you know this one. All right, let's end our poll and I'll share out. Y'all were right there. You know that your maximum is 2 pages. Anything over that, you got correct as well. We'll head over to section C. Section C is where you get to put all that additional information that doesn't fit into the existing sections. Perfect. All right, any other questions about your executive summary? We're feeling ready for that one? Then we are heading over to the biggest section of the report, your section A. Section A is truly the heart of your report and is going to typically be the bulk of your report. It is where you're going to report on your GEPRA measures and your project objectives. As we're looking at those, you'll see this is a screenshot directly from G5. This is what your G5 looks like for section A. Now, we also provide you with that hard copy form. It's great to be able to plot out your stuff in, or if for some reason you needed to submit something separately, we use it for your APR update. But the form itself is in G5. You won't need to upload it. And you'll see that you have a performance measure section. That's where you're going to actually enter in the wording of either your GEPRA measure or your project measure, your project objective there. Okay. Then you're going to come over to measure type and select from that drop-down box. There's a little drop-down arrow, either GEPRA or PROJ, P-R-O-J. Then you're going to come over and enter into the ratios. If it's one of your personal measures, you'll have a target. And for all measures, you'll have an actual. So that is where you'll be reporting. And then you can see you can always use this little button at the bottom to add another measure. Keep in mind, this is a tip I like to give in general. If you hit add performance measure, it's going to add it on that same page, which means you're just going to have one explanation of progress box for any measures on that one page. If you have two measures that are related, that can work well. If you have two that are unrelated, that may mean you don't have enough room to really write a robust explanation of progress. So know that you can go back out of this section A into your list of reporting forms and actually add an additional section A page, which then gives you not only another spot for a performance measure, but a new explanation of progress box. And so often grantees, if you have 5 project measures, you may see that they have 5 section A pages so that they have explanation of progress boxes for each of them. And that's completely fine. But that way you don't find yourself, if you put all 5 on the same page, you do have to fit all of their explanations of progress into just that one box. It still is going to cap out. So I hope that made sense. If that did not make sense, please let me know. All right, we talked about your 2 different types of measures. So you have GEPRA and project. GEPRA are the 2 measures that everybody reports on the same, that were actually your original GEPRA from your NYCP project even. For those, not only do you select GEPRA, but you only report the actual performance data. Then for your project measures, these are the ones that are specific to your actual proposal. Remember, you need to use the wording that you have used in your past APRs. That can't change year to year. If you don't have access to your APR from last year, let us know. We can help you gain access to that. For those measures, you're going to mark PROJ, and then you're going to actually report both your target and your actual. So slightly different between those 2 different types of measures. Now your GEPRA. One GEPRA, super easy to report on. It's your objectives met one. So the wording for that is exactly this, the percentage of the annual measurable objectives as described in the application that are being met. This just means add up how many project measures you have, and then how many did you meet of those. So that one, usually pretty breezy to report on. And then for increase in community collaboration, you have the wording for that, the significant increase in community collaboration efforts that promote college and careers of Indian children. So we're going to dive into exactly how to report these, just as a nice way to set it up for you. For number 1, objectives met. In your ratio box, you're going to put the number of project objectives that you met over the total number of project objectives you have. So if I have 5 project objectives, that's going to be my denominator, my lower number. And if I met 3 of them thus far, then my numerator, my top number, will be 3. What does that look like? Just like this. I've got my GEPRA wording here. I've got my measure type here. GEPRA. I've got nothing in the target because GEPRAs don't have targets. And then I've got my actual here because I met 5 of my 7 objectives. And that's all you have to have. You've completely reported on that now. Now, what about GEPRA 2? This, you're going to put the number of new partnerships over 1. Keeping in mind that we know that it is very likely that you may not have any new partnerships because your grant is in a period where you're solely working on data collection and analysis. So it is perfectly okay and acceptable if there are no new partnerships during this reporting period. But what will that look like? Again, the wording in the box, the measure type, GEPRA, Nothing there, no targets for your GEPRA. And then your actual performance data here in the ratio. In this example, we had 2 new partnerships, so it's 2/1. All right, now let's look at if we're doing our project measures. So remember, for our project measures, we're using the same wording that we've used in previous reporting periods. We put our project measure wording here in our boxes. We mark them PROJ because they're project. They're specific to our project. And then you'll notice we have a target and we have an actual. We have our goal and what we actually did. You'll also notice that both of my measures are reported as 999/999 because I don't know. I'm still collecting information from my past participants. So as of March 31st, I don't know exactly how many people are going to participate. So I report that 999, which is code for I don't have complete data today, but I will by the end of the grant year. And that's fine. You still have to put in your target and you still have to put something here, but you put that and it lets us know you're going to update that later. The key is to always have a robust explanation of progress, whether your data is complete or not. So you could see, even though I have no data complete for my report, I'm still reporting on, well, how am I going about getting these participants to participate in my survey? How many do I already have? So you can see I shared, I have 342 already, but we're still doing X, Y, and Z to try to get more people's data in. So I'm still putting all that contextual information, and then I'll update that quantitative bit on my APR update. All right, a couple other reminders here. Remember that for anything you're reporting on this report, your reporting period never changes. It's October 1st to the end of March, just that time period. And there's 2 really important codes for you to remember. 999/999 means data is not available as of the end of March, but it will be by the end of the grant year. 0/1 means data is not going to be available. It's not available by the end of March, and it won't be available by the end of the grant year, by the end of September. So those are the 2 codes that if you enter that, it signals us as we're reviewing your APRs to know either you're not going to have data at all or you just don't have it yet. All right. Let's answer a couple of questions. Let's test this out. So we have our little model grantee here. And how would you report on their measure? So students are going to increase their reading proficiency by at least 5 points as measured by the beginning and end of year benchmarks. So this is our one from earlier. They take them in September and April. So what will go in each of those boxes? I'll give you a little time to complete this one because I know it has quite a few answer boxes. And you can also enter in the chat if you find it easier, if you're on a device where you can't get to the poll. Oh my, Michelle, I saw your message. Yes. Please evacuate for fires if they occur during your APR webinar. We used to have a project we worked on that one specific grantee, he swore they just looked at his calendar for his meetings and would schedule fire drills during them. All right, I don't
What
see.
did I miss?
I'm not sure exactly when you stepped out, but I believe we were going through the section A portion. And so we are just taking a little poll quiz on that. But it will be in the recording. And then if you have any questions, we'll happily go over the info with you.
Okay,
Yeah.
I think the last thing I heard was you guys were just getting into that.
Yeah. So yeah,
Okay.
so I think you probably just missed that little bit.
Okay,
All right. I don't see any answers just yet. Do we want to just go over what this would be? Oh, I said that and then we got an answer. All right, then I'm going to give about 15 more seconds and then we'll go ahead and go on because I don't want to run out of time for the other portions. All right, let's take a look. Let me see. All right, so I'm going to stop this share so you can actually see what their response was. So they said the measure type was PROJ, correct? Target raw number, nothing, correct? Target ratio, doesn't look like there was a response put in. So we will need a target ratio, so we'll come back there. Target percentage, nothing, correct? Actual raw number, 999 over 999. Actual ratio, nothing. Actual percentage is blank. So you're super close. You're very, very close. Let me show you. You were almost there. So you will need to have a goal, a target, and it's a target or an actual ratio. So you'll be using ratios for both. But you were so, so close. All right, there's one more try. All right, let me pop this one up and we're going to fast finger this one a little bit in the interest of time. And this is that same example where we had 75% of our teachers. Come to find out 20 of the 30 or 67% accomplished the goal. So what would that look like in our form? Fast fingers, fast fingers. Right? 5 more seconds, fast fingers. lock in that answer, hit submit. Right. Let's take a peek. Thank you to whoever our brave person is who's submitting. And let's, oh, there we go. For this one, they have project type, PROJ. So yes, that's the right type of measure. I'm thinking it's not letting you put in a target ratio. Maybe that's the dilemma, because I see it's blank and I'm thinking maybe it's not letting you. Actual raw number, 20/30 actual ratio. Yeah, nothing actual. Okay, so again, super, super close. And maybe I'm gonna have to look. I'm thinking maybe it's being finicky with where it's putting your answers. But yes, very, very close. There are actually two ways that would be perfectly fine to report on this. One being the 67 of 100 for that 67% of teachers, or the 20 out of 30. Either one is totally fine because your target's not changing. Your target is that you want 75%. So you want 75 out of 100. I've had people ask before, like, well, if there are 30 teachers, shouldn't I just put however many teachers I want? Well, but what if next year you have 32 teachers? Or, that number can change. So I would suggest that you do the 75 out of 100 as your goal for that 75%. And either the 67 out of 100 or the 20 out of 30, either one, totally fine. All right. Let's move on to our explanation of progress. And I appreciate you doing those with us. So for the explanation of progress, you've done your quantitative reporting at the top. So now we're moving to our qualitative reporting. We want you to be talking about how you've met or made progress toward the measure. If you didn't meet it, why? What are you doing to address that or to try to meet it in the future? Or how are you kind of readdressing it, kind of coming at it in a different way? What data did you collect to even be able to measure this? When did you collect it? How did you analyze and evaluate that? What activities did you do that contributed to this goal? So like I said, even if you don't have data, what are you doing to get the data collected? And if data is not available, make sure that you're still including all of the available narrative information that you would have if there was data available, as well as the date when data will be available. So if you know, we're still working on getting feedback from our past participants, here's what we've got thus far, here's what we're doing to be able to finish that up. And we anticipate having that data complete by the end of July. A robust explanation of progress is always going to paint more of a picture for your reader and your reviewer than the quantitative. The quantitative is great, but it's just a flat number. That explanation of progress allows you to provide all that context to that number, and it's really, really important. We do often get explanations of progress that are only 1 or 2 sentences. That does not provide sufficient explanation for that number. In order for us to truly understand what is going on in your project, you've got to give those robust explanations of progress. So take advantage of this opportunity to tell the story behind your numbers. Some other kind of key things to think about. Provide all the details about your reported quantitative data. Make sure that you're writing narrative that actually talks about that measure. And explain how your data is collected and compiled for reporting. How are you measuring this? Where are you getting that data? Let's look at a few examples. So in this example, you can see I don't have data for 2 measures. I do for 1. So for 1A, I don't have a huge amount of information because that's just my GEPRA about how many objectives I'm meeting. So I'm letting you know, many of our objectives are still in the process of being measured. So we're going to update this GEPRA when we do our APR update. But for the other two, I need more information. So I'm including information about, okay, well, we serve this many kids. We've reached out through phone calls, emails, newsletters, social media, house visits, community events, word of mouth. Our goal was to get 2/3 to actually participate in the feedback process. So far, we've gotten 342, and that's why we extended our data collection. I'm giving you the full picture of what's going on, even though if you were to look up here, I said data not available. Now, what we sometimes see is data not available, and then we just get a sentence. We will have the data by the end of August. Okay, but that doesn't really tell me much about what's happening. We need this information about, okay, you don't have it yet, but what is going on? Let us in, show us what's happening, paint us the picture. Any questions on explanations of progress? All right. Well, then that takes us to our next superstar question. So let me pull that one up. You'll see there are 3 questions. What should be in your explanation of progress if you're reporting 999 over 999? What should be in your explanation of progress if you report 0 over 1? And then our multiple choice question, which of these is not a good tip for writing your explanation of progress? So remember, we're looking for the non-tip, the tip you should not take. I'll let you pop those in. We appreciate you participating in our APR Superstar quiz. I promise, while sometimes it may seem a little hokey, it really does help to drive that information into your brain.
Especially if others need to relook, they're going to watch the webinar who wasn't there. It just gives an extra explanation. So it's always good.
You'll find yourself when you're doing a report later, talking to yourself as an APR superstar. That little data voice in your head. This will wrap up our Section A chat as well. Section A is definitely the bulkiest part of our APR report. All right, I'm going to give it about 15 more seconds. Lock in those answer choices. And it will accept your poll if there's one that you're not sure about. If you're only answering, say, 2 of the 3, it'll still accept it. All right, I'm going to go ahead and lock these in. And share. So let's see. For number 1, if you're reporting 999 over 999, what should you include? And I got that data will be completed. That is correct. But remember also all that other information. What activities are you doing to help you accomplish this goal? What else is happening in your project around this? But absolutely. Now, what about if you're reporting 0 over 1? Your responses were detailed narrative of what steps were taken and why progress was not met, steps being taken to try to meet objective, and still in process of being measured. So 0 over 1 would not indicate that you're still in the process of measuring. 0 over 1 indicates we do not have data for this measure. So yes, that would be when you give that detailed narrative of the steps taken, why you didn't make progress toward this, or why you were not able to measure this piece, particularly because we are at the end of your grant period. So it would be expected that by and large, you're able to report at least by the end of the grant year on all of your measures. And then, which is not a good tip for writing your explanation of progress. So you can see we had some folks thinking, keep your response brief and to the point. We had some thinking, make sure to include an explanation of progress for all measures, even those with no data currently. The not good tip, the bad tip, is to keep your response brief and to the point. We do want it to be to the point. We do not want it to be brief. So while we do want you talking about your measure and about your data, we want robust, we want beefy explanations of progress. Do not limit yourself to a super, super brief response. And then our final reminder in this area is in regards to your APR update. So these are due at the conclusion of the grant year. You have until October 26th to turn them in, but again, we'll give you all the information well in advance. So it's something pretty easy to knock out before your grant even ends on September 30th. And it's your opportunity to update that Section A data. You are expected to update any measures that you reported as 999, because it's then the end of the grant year, you should have data available. They are submitted via email, so you don't have to get back into G5, and we'll provide all that info in an upcoming talking circle, so you'll be at the ready. Any other Section A questions? Feeling good about Section A? All right, then we're hitting Section B for your budget. So conveniently, Section B stands for your budget section. As we head into the budget section, there are actually two reporting forms for this area. This is the form that you'll use to write a narrative that describes all the spending for the current project year, ideally by budget category. And you can type that all into the form. The form is not already in G5. You'll be using the form provided, and then you'll upload that as a PDF. PDFs are always the answer for G5. When you're writing that Section B, really think about all the funds that you've expended or even obligated, even if you haven't drawn it down yet, through the end of March. So while on the cover sheet, we're all about drawdowns, when we get to Section B, we want you to paint the full budget picture. So we want you to also talk about those funds that you've expended but not yet drawn down through the end of March. But we also want you to talk about what's your drawdown frequency. I'll tell you that our hope is that you're drawing down monthly, but no less than quarterly. So ideally every month, but no less than quarterly. If you're drawing down less than quarterly, it's considered not frequently enough. And so we would want you to talk about how frequently are you completing drawdowns? And if it didn't happen at least quarterly, what are you trying to do to fix that situation? Are you meeting with the budget office? Have you set up a drawdown schedule with them? Whatever you're doing to try to fix that, and how you're tracking your expenditures independent of your budget office. So how do you know what you've expended throughout the year? And then finally, the other part that we want you to talk about is if you anticipate having any funds remaining at the end of the project year. So come September 30th, are you anticipating that you're going to have any money left? If so, tell us why. And whether you anticipate requesting a no-cost extension. A no-cost extension is just extending the end date of your grant so that you can complete project objectives. Now, that's the part that's really key, is you're not just extending it because you happen to have a little money left. You're extending it because you have not completed some project objectives and you need additional time in order to do that. Now, it does allow you to use any funds that you have remaining that you've requested in that no-cost extension, but it can't just be requested because you have money left. It has to be to complete work that is not done yet. Those NCEs are not guaranteed, so we want you to still be making every effort to expend all your funds by the end of September. and complete all your work within your existing grant period. However, if you think that you potentially will need a no-cost extension, you will want to address that in your section B. And that does bring me to a little question we have here. Well, it'll come up momentarily. All right, so let's look at an example. So this is an example of a section B narrative. You'll notice that they've broken down their discussion by budget category, just makes it a lot easier of a read. And you'll also notice that they have specifically called out how often they're doing drawdowns. So in their instance, they weren't doing drawdowns for about 4 months because there was someone missing in the fiscal office, so there was no one to do it. So they talk through, here's what was going on and why we were not meeting that expectation. And here's what we've done to fix that situation so that moving forward, we'll be doing monthly drawdowns. So they made sure to include that information in their narrative. Now, let's look at the second part. You've done your budget narrative. The other piece is your optional budget reporting tool. We provide this tool for you. You don't have to use it, but if you choose not to use it, you are expected to provide all of this same information in a form of your own choosing. So for the most part, most people find it easier just to use the tool because it's already got everything that you need to put in your report, but you are welcome to create your own form that has that exact same information in it. As we're looking at that form, you are only typing in the areas that are yellow. These other two columns, shouldn't have clicked on that. These other two columns will calculate for you. Now, the budget reporting tool is not like when you do a budget revision. With a budget revision, you're entering each line item expenditure. With the budget tool, when you're just doing your APR budget reporting, you're just reporting by budget category. So you're reporting personnel as a whole. You're reporting fringe as a whole. Each of these pieces as a whole. So you do not have to enter your line item expenditures. As you move through the form, this first column is your approved budget as of your approved budget revision in the fall, unless you've submitted one more recently. But whatever your most recent approved budget is, goes right here. This next column are funds that you've drawn down. So this total should match your 8B on your cover sheet because it's all your drawdowns during this reporting period. This next column are any funds that you've spent, but you have not drawn down yet. There's often a delay between when you actually spend the funds and when the drawdowns occur. So you're just reflecting any expenditures that happened by March 31st, but didn't happen to get drawn down by March 31st. That will then, in this white column, calculate for you your current available balance. You'll then come over here to your rationale for available funds and explain why do we have that amount remaining and what do we plan to do to expend that money by the end of the grant year. So that's a narrative piece. Then in this column, you're going to be predicting how much you will spend by the end of the grant year. So do you plan to spend all your personnel funds by the end of the grant year? If so, put that amount here. If not, how much do you think you can spend by the end of the grant year? That will then, based on what your predictions are, create for you how much money, if any, you may have left at the end of the grant year. If you don't anticipate having any money left at the end of the grant year, you don't have to fill out this last column. But if you have any amounts in this column right here, if you anticipate having any money left at the end of the grant year, you need to complete this column explaining what do you plan to do? Are you anticipating that you're going to apply for a no-cost extension? Are you anticipating that, well, I just will have this tiny amount left, so I plan on just returning it? Don't return it. Spend it on good things. But that may be the case. This is where you're going to explain what's going to happen about that. Okay. Now we do have another reminder here about what goes in those two narrative columns. But remember, everybody has to do column F narrative. Only those who will have funds remaining at the end will have to do column I. Okay. We've included some examples. You'll see these also in your sample APR. You'll notice here, these were areas where there were no funds remaining. So while we gave a great little description of what we're going to do with it for the rest of the year, we don't have to complete that last column. However, in our other example, if we think we may have a no cost extension, here I'm saying, you know, I think I can get it all spent, but I'm really not sure. I may have to actually keep some money here. If so, I would keep 9,000. And this is what I would do with it. So give us that heads up. So now we just want to get a real quick, this is a very fast finger. Do you anticipate needing a no cost extension? And then that's combined with your superstar questions that are super quick. Do you plan to use the optional budget reporting tool? If you use the budget reporting tool, or if you use the narrative, do you need the budget reporting tool? And vice versa, if you use the tool, do you need the budget narrative? And then I'm going to put it on the picture for your last question, because the others are self-explanatory in the poll. But you can pick as many of these columns as is applicable, but which ones have to be completed? Now we are nearing, we're not there yet, but we're nearing the end. So we are going to keep this a fast finger question. Lock in those answers. Give you about 15 more seconds, and then we're going to do the big reveal. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and lock in your answers. So if you're about to hit submit, do it now. All right. So as far as needing a no cost extension, that's going to be applicable to each person individually. Because only one person, our current APR superstar, completed the poll, please let us know whether it's a message in the chat or a direct message, a private message, whether you anticipate needing a no cost extension. Even if you don't want to participate in the poll questions, that is something that we'd like to know from each of you. Do you plan to use the optional budget reporting tool? Again, it is up to you, but I do think it makes it a little bit easier. This person's taking that easy route. Do you need a section B narrative if you use the budget reporting tool? They said no. So if you're able to answer all those questions within your budget reporting tool, that's fine. But typically you are going to need a budget narrative and a budget reporting tool both. Okay, so you will need both reporting pieces. Do you need an optional budget reporting tool if you have a budget narrative? Yes. So section B does have two documents, the narrative and the tool. And then which columns must be completed on the optional budget reporting tool? They said A, there's actually nothing to do in A, B, C, D, F, G, and I. So yes, they were absolutely right. The only thing being that in column A, there's not actually anything you have to type. We already have the budget categories there for you. But our one brave soul doing the poll did an excellent job. All right, let's hop into section C, the very last part of your report. Section C is what we call the additional information section. This is where you can document and highlight your success stories, your challenges. If you had any additional information that wouldn't fit in the executive summary or your section A, you can always put it here in your section C, as well as anything else. So sometimes we'll have folks who want to link to their website, or they want to include some pictures or a news article, any other information, maybe an intermediary report that's already been completed by your evaluation team. Any of that is fair game in section C. You can include as much info here as you would like, but everything will need to be uploaded as one PDF document. That's really key to your success in uploading. So you'll want to smush it all into one PDF. If you're not sure how to do that, let us know. We're happy to help you and kind of walk you through that process. But the part that we need to make sure you have in your section C is this information. So kind of the same idea as with section B, we've created a section C reporting tool. You can use it, or you can provide the same information in your own format. And kind of the same idea that we find it easier just to use this, because then you know that you've completed everything that your program officer is looking for. But if you want to put it in another format, that is absolutely okay. So this is just a Word document that you'll complete. Again, you'll save it as a PDF or smush it together with all of that other great information that you want to put in section C and just upload it into G5. As you look at the form, it's a fairly breezy form. You're just putting in your grant information at the top, the percentage of time that you as a project director spend on this project, whether that's 30%, 100%, whatever that might be. How many staff work full and part-time? So full-time, of course, is pretty self-explanatory. They spend 100% of their time on this project, but know that by part-time, that could be someone who is full-time with your organization, but maybe only 25% of their time is spent on this project. So we just mean they have part-time effort on this project, but they could be a full-time employee with your company or with your organization. List the key activities that you conducted this year. If you are using any evidence-based strategies or services, maybe in the evaluation of your data or your reporting, pop that in there. Then list your partners and their current status, whether they're active or inactive. Any key personnel changes. If there's not any, just say no changes. How do you plan to sustain program activities beyond the federal funding period if you do? So do you plan to continue doing this data collection and analysis with your projects? If so, what will that look like? How will you be able to continue that? If you have any planned changes for the remainder of the project year. And then the part that I think is particularly helpful for us, in one sentence, what's your greatest project success and your greatest project challenge this reporting period? And it can be a little bit of a long sentence, but just one sentence. Greatest success and greatest challenge. And that's it for the section C tool. If you complete everything in the section C tool, that's all that's needed in section C. So you don't have to have a separate form if you don't have anything else you want or need to share. So let's go into our final question here. Last question. Do you plan to use the section C tool? If you do a section C narrative, do you need a section C tool? If you do the section C tool, do you need the section C narrative? And then finally, how should I submit sections B and C? Are you going to type it all into G5? Do you upload each one to G5? Is section B the Excel? Is section C a PDF? Are section B and C one PDF? Or should you just email everything to Donna? Fast finger that in. We got about 15 seconds. All right. Let's share. Everybody seems to plan to use the tool. I think that's easier, but up to you. We're torn. If we have a Section C narrative, or if we use the Section C tool, do you need a Section C narrative? No, you don't have to. As long as you complete the tool, that's really all that's required of Section C. And so then if you need, do you need an optional Section C tool if you use a narrative? And they said, yes, that is correct. And then how should you submit? We were a little torn on this one. You're going to upload it all as one big PDF. So that's where if you have any struggle getting that all into one PDF, we're happy to help you with that. If you've never done that before, there's sometimes just a little learning curve there that we're happy to help with. But yes, you'll upload it all as one big PDF of fun. And that actually takes me to my last little reminder here, which is, where do I put all this stuff? So just a nice little chart to wrap that up for you. The cover sheet, you're going to do in G5. Then you're going to download it, get it signed, scan or take a picture, and then upload that signed cover sheet back in. The executive summary, you're going to use the form we've provided and then upload it as a PDF. Section A, you're going to do everything in G5. You don't need any forms for that. Everything is in G5. Section B, the narrative and the tool are two separate forms. And Section C, the narrative and tool are forms. And those will all be done in those forms and then uploaded as a PDF into G5. So I think this is a good one to come back to if you're trying to figure out later, like, is this something I do there? Do they have a form for me? Come back and check here. Remember, G5 is currently open for reporting. Only your project director of record is able to actually submit that report, though. That is due by April 28th before midnight. And after that reporting deadline, you will not be able to go in and revise your report. Okay. It becomes off limits. You will not be able to make any further changes. The last G5 tip. G5 is a tricky duck. As you complete each form, it's going to say complete out beside it. And we often have grantees who see that it says complete all the way down and they think their report is submitted and they move on. Your report is not submitted. Don't stop. At the bottom of that list of forms, once they all say complete, there is a button that says submit the report. Click that button and you'll know you've clicked that button because it's going to ask you to confirm. Do you really want to submit this report? Yes. As a final check, this is just my paranoia speaking, but join me in this so you make sure your report is complete. When you think you've submitted and it asked you if you're sure and you're like, yes, I've submitted, log totally out of G5, log back in. And when you go to your report section out beside your report, it will say submitted with a date and time that you submitted it. If it doesn't have a date and time that you submitted it, it's not submitted. Try again. So that is my big tip to make sure that you're not stuck going, well, I thought I submitted it and it's stuck there in draft form. Make sure that it changes and says submitted with a date and a timestamp. That's key. And make sure that that date and timestamp are prior to April 28th at 11:59 p.m. Eastern time, because I know none of you are on Eastern time. So make sure that you remember that it is prior to that Eastern time. All right. Any other questions? I have a couple more reminders, but I want to make sure if you have any questions, we get them. All right, then my last few reminders for you as we wrap. The no-cost extension request due date is August 18th. We will give you more information about how to do that if that is something you need to do at our next talking circle. So don't worry about it right now. Just focus on your APR and then we'll chat about that in May. Your APR update, again, we're going to chat about that at our next talking circle. We'll help you get it done before your grant year is even over, but it's definitely due by October 26th. And as you're working on your APR, we are here to help and support you. It's not just this webinar and then good luck. We are here to hold your hand every step of the way. So we have office hours coming up April 27th, which is the day before it's due for any just last minute things. We also have an all program APR talking circle on April 20th. That's open to all the discretionary grantees to come. We'll give you some tips, some reminders. We'll have an open forum for any questions that you might have. So that's a great kind of mid-month check-in. We also have coaching. So if you want some one-on-one support, you can use that Calendly link and schedule some coaching. And then we also have our email address, which I'll share again here in a minute on our contact slide, so that if you need to reach out and you were just having a quick question, we check that and we endeavor to answer all of those within about 24 hours. So we really try to get back to you very quickly with responses to that as well. And then another reminder that you did have a DCE talking circle in March. Some of you were able to make it, some of you were not. That is recorded. I would highly, highly, highly encourage you to go back and watch that recording, because we gave a lot of important and helpful details on the final deliverables due for your grant project. So if you were not able to attend that live, you really, really need to watch that recording and then reach out with any questions you have after watching it. Our next DCE talking circle, so specifically for your grant group, is May 10th at 3 Eastern. Attendance is mandatory for that because we're getting into the nitty-gritty time of the final bits of your grant. And it is super, super important that you're part of those conversations and getting all of that information. Now you'll see that I've popped up our last poll for the day. The last time I will be bothering you to complete a poll, and that is with feedback about this event. We do these APR webinars every year. We always endeavor to make them better and better each year, and hopefully more helpful for you as you work on your APR reporting. So it's really helpful for us if you would take just a minute, it's short, a minute, to provide a little bit of feedback to us so that we can continue to hopefully provide the assistance that you need. While you're working on that poll, I'll tell you about some other things going on. Our student artist competition, which I personally am very excited about, has had its deadline a little bit extended with spring breaks and things going on in March. We decided we needed to give folks a little bit of leeway there. So it is now due April 14th. Please, please encourage your students to submit their work. This is such a cool opportunity for them to be highlighted at the national level and through the Department of Ed. They can submit art, they can submit writing, they can submit videos. It's open to all grade levels, and it's a very easy submission process. If you have kids and you're needing help on how to get their work submitted, reach out. We're happy to help. We'll walk you step by step how to do it, but it is due about 2.5 weeks from now, April 14th. So make sure, encourage some kiddos to get in on that. You'll be seeing this week, oh, I went too far, a registration go out for the project director meeting. Remember that project directors are required to attend, but you have the wonderful opportunity to invite your entire team this year. So you'll see that invite going out this week. And then I'll just leave up our contact information here so that you have the email for Donna, for the OIE team. If you have any questions as you get started on this process, as you're going through over the next few weeks, please let us know. We really do want to help you with that. And we will stay on for a few minutes. I know we're just a couple of minutes over, but if you have questions, we're happy to stay on and answer them. Otherwise, I'm sure we'll be seeing you across the month, whether it's on coaching or talking circles or office hours. And
please utilize
APR
these
reporting.
tools. All the tools that are provided, we've done from feedback over the years, and it's really helping to streamline the process to make this process as easy as possible. A lot of time went into creating them. They are optional tools, of course, but we find that it streamlines it so it can just be plopped in, or when I'm looking at APRs, I can get that processed even more quickly. So it really is helpful. And I do hope you take advantage of these. It's for you and me. And
For everyone.
OIE TA team. Everybody.